"Don't make a sound," my gardener whispered, pulling me behind the tall boxwood hedge along the side of my own driveway. "Please, Mrs. Eleanor, I need you to see this. Just stay low and don't move." I was 63 years old, wearing my good navy dress, holding a small gift bag with a blue ribbon on it. I had just pulled into my son's driveway to drop off the rehearsal dinner gift before heading to the restaurant. I was not supposed to crouch in the bushes like a frightened rabbit. "Gerald," I hissed, grabbing his arm. "What on earth?" He put one finger to his lips. His eyes were serious in a way I had never seen in the 12 years he had tended my flower beds and repaired my fence posts and waved to me every Tuesday morning from the yard next door. Gerald was not a dramatic man. He was the kind of man who showed up early, stayed late, and never once complained about the weather. If Gerald Hutchins was hiding behind a hedge, something was very wrong. So I stayed low, and I watched. My son's name is Daniel. He is 37 years old, a civil engineer with kind eyes and his father's broad shoulders and a laugh that fills a room without trying. I raised him alone after my husband, Robert, passed from a heart attack 11 years ago. Daniel was 26 then, old enough to hold it together at the funeral, young enough that I still caught him crying in his old bedroom when he thought I had gone to sleep. We got through it together, the two of us, and I think that hardship made us closer than most mothers and sons I know. When Daniel told me he was going to propose to Vanessa, I had tried to feel nothing but joy. I had tried very hard. Vanessa Cole had come into Daniel's life 18 months before the proposal, introduced through a colleague at his firm. She was beautiful in a calculated way, always put together, always saying the right thing at the right time. She called me Eleanor from the very first meeting, which I found forward, and then switched to Mom after the engagement, which I found presumptuous. She laughed at Daniel's jokes a half-second too late, like she was watching for his expression first before deciding whether something was funny. Little things, the kind of things that make you feel foolish for noticing. Daniel adored her. He lit up around her, and I loved my son enough to keep my small, nagging doubts folded quietly inside myself, like a note I was not sure I should ever send. The rehearsal dinner was tomorrow evening. The wedding was the day after that. And I was crouching behind a boxwood hedge in my good navy dress, watching my son's fiancée stand in his driveway talking to a man I had never seen before in my life. He was roughly Vanessa's age, maybe early 30s, lean and tanned with the kind of easy posture that comes from never having worried too much about anything. He had a duffel bag over one shoulder. Vanessa stood close to him, not touching, but close. The kind of close that means something. I couldn't hear every word. I caught fragments. "Not supposed to be here until Thursday," Vanessa said. Her voice was low and tight. "Change of plans," the man said. He said it like he owned the change, like he owned the whole conversation. "You need to leave before he—" "We need to talk about the account, Nessa." Nessa. He called her Nessa. "Not here," she said. "Then where?" "You stopped answering my calls." Vanessa glanced toward the front door. I pulled back slightly behind the hedge. Gerald put a hand on my shoulder, steadying me. "I'll call you tonight," she said to the man. "Just go. Please just go right now." The man looked at her for a long moment. Then he adjusted the duffel bag on his shoulder and said, very quietly, "You know this doesn't go away just because you get married." He walked to a silver car parked 2 houses down that I hadn't noticed when I pulled up. He got in without looking back. Vanessa stood in the driveway for a moment, her arms crossed, staring after him. Then she went inside. Gerald and I stayed behind the hedge until we heard the door close. I straightened up slowly, one hand on my knee. My heart was going too fast for a woman my age. "Gerald," I said quietly. "Who was that man?" He exhaled through his nose. "I was hoping you could tell me. He's been here twice before, both times when Daniel was at work." I looked at him. "You've seen him twice. 3 times now, counting today." Gerald pulled off his work gloves and held them in both hands. "I didn't know what to do with it, Mrs. Eleanor. I kept telling myself it was nothing. Maybe a cousin, a work friend. But then I saw the way she looked at him and the way she looked at the door, and I thought." He paused. "I thought you should see it for yourself before tomorrow." I stood there in my good navy dress, holding a gift bag with a blue ribbon, and I felt the bottom drop out of something I hadn't even known I was standing on. I drove home. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time. I am not a woman who jumps to conclusions. Robert always said that about me, and it was usually a compliment. I think things through. I turn them over. I look at them from more than one angle before I decide what I'm seeing. So I sat at my kitchen table, and I tried to think of every innocent explanation for what I had witnessed. Old friend she hadn't told Daniel about. A family member with some complicated history. Someone from her past who had shown up uninvited and whom she was firmly, appropriately sending away. These were possible. These were all possible. But he had called her Nessa, and he had said, "You know this doesn't go away just because you get married." I picked up my phone, and I called my daughter-in-law's sister, Patricia, who I had met 3 times at family gatherings, and who had always seemed to me like a woman with her feet on the ground. I told her I had a quick question about the seating chart, which was a lie, and in the course of a very careful conversation, I mentioned that I thought I had seen Vanessa's friend, I couldn't remember his name, the one with the silver car, and was he coming to the wedding? There was a pause on Patricia's end. "Vanessa doesn't have a friend with a silver car that I know of," she said. "Maybe someone from work," I said. "Which job?" Patricia said. I went very still. "I'm sorry?" "Vanessa has had a few different positions over the past few years," Patricia said carefully. "I just wasn't sure which colleagues you meant." Another pause. "Eleanor, is everything okay?" I told her everything was fine, and I would see her at the rehearsal dinner. I hung up and sat with my hands flat on the table. Then I did something I am not proud of, but I would do again without hesitation. I called my nephew Marcus, who works in financial compliance and who owes me a favor that I have never once called in during the 6 years since I quietly paid off a debt that would have cost him his job. I called him and I said, "Marcus, I need you to look into someone for me, carefully and quickly. Her name is Vanessa Cole." He called me back in 2 hours. I want to be clear about what he found, because I want you to understand that I did not act on suspicion. I did not act on instinct alone, though my instincts were screaming. I acted on facts. Vanessa Cole, 34 years old, had been engaged once before, to a man named Christopher Halford in Tucson, Arizona 4 years ago. That engagement had ended when Christopher discovered that $42,000 had moved from a joint savings account they had opened together for a home purchase. The account was emptied 3 weeks before Vanessa ended the engagement. No criminal charges were filed. Christopher, from what Marcus could find, had simply let it go rather than endure the process. There was more. The man with the silver car was named Todd Merritt. He and Vanessa had been in a relationship that overlapped, in timeline, with the first 8 months of her relationship with Daniel. There were shared financial records, a joint credit account opened 18 months ago, around the time Vanessa had met my son. The account was still open. I sat with this information and I thought about my son. I thought about Daniel at 26, standing at his father's graveside with his jaw clenched and his eyes red, refusing to fall apart until he was alone. I thought about how hard he had worked. I thought about the house he had bought himself, the retirement account he had been carefully building, the trust fund my husband had left him that Daniel had never once touched because he said he wanted to use it for something that really mattered. He had told me 6 months ago that he and Vanessa were thinking about combining their finances after the wedding. He had said it like it was a good thing, a grown-up thing, a sign of a real partnership. He had been proud. I thought about the way Vanessa had stood in the driveway looking after Todd Merritt's silver car, the way she had said, "I'll call you tonight." 2 days before her wedding to my son, I did not sleep that night. I sat at the kitchen table and I tried to think clearly, and the clearest thought I kept arriving at was this. I had one day. I could not tell Daniel over the phone. I had tried to imagine that conversation 100 times, and every version of it ended with him defending her, asking me why I had been investigating his fiancée, telling me I had never given Vanessa a fair chance. He was not wrong that I had reservations about her. He knew that. It would be too easy for her to spin this as his mother's jealousy if the information came through me. Privately, with nothing in front of him that he could see with his own eyes. I needed him to see it himself. I called Gerald the next morning before 7. "I need your help," I said, "and I need you to trust me." Gerald had been thinking too, it turned out. He told me that the morning of the wedding, he had to deliver some things to the reception hall early, and Vanessa's wedding party was using a suite at the Hargrove Hotel, 3 blocks from the church for getting ready. He had heard Daniel mention the name. And Todd Merritt's silver car, Gerald had noticed, was still parked 2 streets over from Daniel's house when he drove past at 6 that morning. He was still in town. "I think she's going to see him," Gerald said. "This morning, I think she'll find a way." "I think so too," I said. We had a plan within the hour. Gerald picked me up at 8:30. I was dressed for a wedding pale gray skirt suit, pearl earrings, low heels that I could actually walk in. I had a folder in my lap that Marcus had helped me put together, printed records, screenshots, documentation, the kind of thing that could not be argued away. Gerald drove to the Hargrove Hotel. We parked across the street, set back where we could see the side entrance that the bridal suite used. We waited 20 minutes. At 9:17, Vanessa came out of the side entrance. She was not in her wedding dress. She was in a silk robe with her hair half-pinned, and she walked quickly, head down, toward the parking structure on the left side of the building. Todd Merritt was waiting inside the entrance of the parking structure. "Stay here," I told Gerald. "Mrs. Eleanor." "Stay here," I said again, and I got out of the car. I walked across the street and into the parking structure, and I stood 10 feet away from my son's fiancée and the man she had a joint credit account with, and I waited until they saw me. Vanessa's face went the color of paper. "Eleanor," she said, "what are you? This isn't." "I know about Christopher Halford," I said. My voice came out steadier than I felt. "I know about the account. I know about the $42,000. I looked at Todd Merritt, and I know who you are." Nobody said anything for a moment. "This is a misunderstanding," Vanessa said. Her voice had changed. The warm, careful modulation she always used around me was gone. What replaced it was flatter and harder. "You don't know what you think you know." "Maybe not," I said, "but my son will be able to decide that for himself, because I'm going to show him everything I have." I held up the folder. Before the ceremony, Vanessa stared at me. Something moved behind her eyes calculation, I thought. She was deciding how to play this. "You'll destroy him," she said. "Do you know how much he's looking forward to today? You'll ruin the best day of his life because of old rumors and paperwork you don't understand." "I'll give him the chance to understand it," I said. "That's all I'm doing." "He won't believe you." "Perhaps not," I said. "But I have to try." I left her standing there with Todd Merritt, and I walked back to Gerald's car, and I sat down, and I found that my hands were shaking. I pressed them flat on the folder in my lap, and I breathed. "Where to?" Gerald asked. "The church," I said. "Daniel gets there at 10 to take photos with the groomsmen." Gerald drove. My son was standing in the small garden beside St. Andrew's Episcopal with his 3 groomsmen when I came around the corner. He looked so much like his father in that charcoal suit that my chest tightened. He saw me and smiled, and then he saw my expression and the smile faded. "Mom? What's wrong? You're not supposed to be here yet." "I need 5 minutes," I said. "Just you and me." He told his groomsmen he'd be right back. We walked to the far end of the garden where a stone bench sat under an oak tree. Daniel sat down. I remained standing because I was afraid if I sat down I would lose my nerve. I told him everything. I told him about Gerald and the hedge and the man in the driveway. I told him about the phone call with Patricia. I told him about Marcus and what he had found. I put the folder in Daniel's hands, and I stood quietly while he went through it, page by page, and I watched my son's face, and I will not describe to you what I saw there because some things are private, even in a story. He was quiet for a long time when he finished. "She's at the hotel right now with him," I said softly. "I spoke to her myself 20 minutes ago." Daniel put the folder down on his knee and looked at the old oak tree above us for a moment. He was very still. "Did she deny it?" he finally asked. "She called it a misunderstanding," I said. He nodded slowly. Just nodded, like he was filing something away in a very careful place. "I need to make a phone call," he said. I gave him his privacy. I walked back toward the church entrance and stood with Gerald, who had parked and come to wait. We didn't speak. After about 15 minutes, Daniel came back around the corner. He was carrying the folder under his arm. His face had settled into something that was not quite calm, but was something like resolve. "I called her," he said. "She didn't answer." He paused. "I called Patricia. Patricia told me about a conversation she'd had with a mutual friend 8 months ago. Something she decided not to tell me because she wasn't sure it was her place. He stopped again. She was trying to protect me too, in the wrong way, but still. Daniel. She's not coming, Mom, he said it quietly. I don't think she was ever coming. I think she saw you in that parking structure, and she made her decision. He was right. We would find out later, in pieces, that Vanessa and Todd had left the hotel within 30 minutes of my confrontation and driven to the airport. Todd Merritt, it turned out, was not simply an old boyfriend. He was a partner, of a kind they had run the same scheme twice before, in different cities, targeting men who had assets and who trusted too easily. The joint credit account in Vanessa's and Todd's names had been opened with the specific intention of being used once Vanessa had access to Daniel's trust fund, which she had been slowly, carefully working towards since month 4 of their relationship. I did not know all of this on the day of the wedding. All I knew, standing in that church garden with my son, was that the woman he had planned to marry was gone. Daniel called his groomsmen over and spoke to them briefly. He called the caterer and the florist. He walked into the church and spoke to the minister. He handled every part of it with a quiet, practical dignity that made me ache with love for him and grief for the pain he was carrying so neatly. The guests who had already arrived were told there would be no ceremony. Daniel stood at the front of the church and said it himself, clearly and without drama, thanking them for coming and asking for privacy. Several people cried. Daniel did not cry, not there. He cried later, in my kitchen, sitting at the same table where I had sat 2 nights before, with my hands flat and my heart pounding. I made tea and I sat across from him, and I did not tell him it would be all right because I didn't know that yet. I just sat with him. Sometimes that's the only true thing you can offer someone. The weeks afterward were hard. Daniel took 2 weeks away from work. He stayed with me for the first week, and we watched old movies and I cooked every meal, and he slowly started to come back to himself. He was angry, and then he was sad, and then he was something quieter that I think was the beginning of acceptance. Marcus helped connect him with a financial attorney. The joint credit account, which had been used to make several purchases in the weeks before the wedding, apparently in anticipation of what was meant to come next, was frozen, and the matter turned over to an investigator. I will not tell you that justice came quickly or cleanly, because it did not. It rarely does. But it came. 3 months after the day that was supposed to be his wedding day, Daniel called me on a Tuesday evening. "I'm okay, Mom," he said. "I just wanted you to know that." "I know you are," I said. "I've been watching." He laughed. It was a real laugh, small but real. "You were crouching in my bushes, Mom. I need you to fully acknowledge how strange that was." "I was behind the hedge," I said. "There's a distinction." He laughed again, and I laughed too. And outside my kitchen window, the evening was turning gold the way it does in late September, when the light gets low, and everything looks briefly like it might be okay after all. I want to say something to you, if I may. Something I have been thinking about since all of this happened. I almost didn't act. I want you to know that. I sat at my table for a long time, talking myself out of it, telling myself I was projecting, telling myself I was the difficult mother-in-law in the story I was building in my head, telling myself that my son was a grown man who had made his choice, and my job was to smile and hold my flowers, and trust that he knew what he was doing. And maybe in other circumstances that would have been the right thing. Maybe sometimes the quiet, uninvolved choice is the loving one. I don't have a rule for every situation, but I had facts, and I had a folder, and I had one day. There is a difference between interfering in your child's life because you cannot let go, and stepping forward because you are the only one who sees something real and true and dangerous. That difference matters. You have to know which one you're doing. You have to be honest with yourself about the difference. I was honest with myself, and so I acted, and my son is all right. That is enough for me. That will always be enough. Gerald, by the way, I have given a very significant raise, and I baked him a lemon pound cake that he called the best he had ever eaten. He deserves more than that, honestly. He deserves a great deal more than that. But it is a start.